Hi, everybody. Welcome to the sixth, count 'em, six, class on writing the Heart Sutra. And we will start this class with chanting the Heart Sutra, which we'll go to right now. I'm going to mute everybody.
수상행식역부여시 사리자시제법공상 불생불멸불구부정 부정불감시도공중무색 무수상행식 무한히 비설신이 무색성향 미촉법 무한계 내지 무의식계 무무명령 무무명실 내지 무노사용 무노사진 무고짐멸조 무지영 무득 이무소득고 보리살타이 반야바라밀타고 신무가에 무가에도 무유건보 오리전도 몽상부경열반 삼세제 불위 반야바라밀타고 두간욕타라 삼약삼보리고 지반야 바라밀타 시대신주 시대명주 시무상주 시무등등주능제유 최고진실부라 고설반야 바라밀타 주즉설주와 아제아제 바라 아제 바라 승아제 모지사바하 아제 아제 바라 아제 바라 승아제 모지사바하 아제 아제 바라 아제 바라 승아제 모지사바하 마하반야 바람타 신경.
So I'm actually going to leave this video up for a second because I want to go back to the line numbers that are in this are actually the same as the line numbers that we're using in the class. And so we can see here we're going to be this month in this class number 6, we're going to be talking about lines 7, 8, and 9. And so here's line 7 right here, down here, 수상행식역부여시. And so this means feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness. Also, actually these two characters together mean also like this. Like this is a favorite phrase of Zen Master Sung San's. This is like this. So also like this refers back to lines 5 and 6 previously, which well, actually even up to line 4. Shariputra, form is not different from emptiness. Emptiness is not different from form. Form is like emptiness. Emptiness is like form. And the same is true of feelings, perceptions, impulses, and consciousness. Okay, so the first line that we're going to be doing this week is just this last one down here. Feelings, perceptions, impulses, haeng, which is a word, the same word that was used to refer to Shariputra's practice of the Prajnaparamita. When we translate that as Shariputra is practicing deeply the Prajnaparamita, it's the same word here as um, the fourth skanda, haeng, which we're here translating as impulses, and then consciousness, shik, and then yeok is yeok bu means also yo, or actually more ya is a better ya shi, like this. Okay, and then the next two lines we're also covering 8 and 9. Sarija, which we've already covered what Sarija means. That's Shariputra. Um, she je법공상, uh, she j all are all dharmas empty, characterized by. So the grammar, Chinese grammar, is different from English grammar, and it's and it's especially different when you have something that is like poetic or philosophical. Um, but here the Shariputra, we translate this as Shariputra. All dharmas are marked with emptiness. So this last one means marked. Um, this character means emptiness, gong. This is beop, which is dharma, whatever a dharma is. And here we're not referring to the Buddha dharma, we're talking about some kind of dharmas that are all marked with emptiness that may include the Buddha dharma, but it includes all dharmas. And this is all, and this is again she. Okay, and then the last line that we're doing this month, 불생불멸불구부정. Do not appear, do not disappear, are not tainted, and are not pure. 불생불멸불구부정. Okay, so we're going to go over all that. That's basically the entire lesson this week. Thank you for coming. This month. Thank you for, just joking. All right, so now I'm going to, let's see, make that small, bring up good old PowerPoint, and start going over this in more detail. There we go. And then all right. So this is lesson number 6. Lesson number 6, lines 7 through 9. Just to remind me and everybody else where we are. This is August 5th. These are the dates on which the remaining 6 classes will be held. And today we'll be meeting from 3 until 5. We'll have 2, 5, or possibly 10-minute breaks, but probably more like 5 minutes. And this is everything we'll be covering. 수상행식역부여시, 사리자시제법공상, 불생불멸불구부정. And so every time we meet, I try to play the chanting recording at least a couple times, if not 3 times. It's actually possibly the most important part of this class. Is just reinforcing the learning of the Heart Sutra, because it's so much. Once you have sounds and meanings to associate with the characters, they're a lot easier to keep track of in your mind. These shapes by themselves are pretty impossible to keep track of. But if you have sounds and meanings to associate with them, then it becomes doable, not necessarily easy. All right. And just to further orient us, the dark green is where we are, lines 7, 8, and 9. Everything that's in green is what's covered in the months 4, 5, and 6. And so everything in blue is what's covered in months 7, 8, and 9. And then in the dark blue, or bluish purple, is the last 3 months of the class, where we'll get to the part leading up to the mantra, but we already did the mantra as part of the first part of the class. We did the title and the mantra and the first three words of the first line were all in the yeah. Anyway, it was all previously covered. Oh yeah, and then even some of the line in 1 and 2. Yeah. Okay. So all right. So what is new? And we're getting far enough into the Heart Sutra now that I have to focus in presenting the classes. I've got to focus on what are the new characters, but at the same time, it's important to review and to remember the characters that have already been covered, the characters and components. But here in yellow are just the new ones. So su is new. Su means feelings. Saeng is new. Sang is new. Sang means perceptions. And it's I think important to take note of the fact that just translating these things into English is one thing. Then saying that you know what the 5 skandhas are and what each of the 5 skandhas are and what do they mean and how do they work and what does it have to do with the teachings of Buddhism and what does it have to do with our lives. Oh, that's a deeper subject, but actually I believe that working on the Heart Sutra, practicing the Heart Sutra helps us with that. So su, sang, heng is not highlighted because we've already done it. Shik. Shik is consciousness. So when Emperor Wu of Liang asked Bodhidharma, "Who are you?" Bodhidharma answered, "Bu shik," not knowing. Oops, I did it. I always do that. Okay. This is the shik in Bu shik. Okay. Yeok. So both yeok and bu kind of mean also, and you put them together and they both mean also together. Bu is a character that you can I don't know if I have a slide that really goes into the meaning of bu, but it's what do I have it down here as? Bu, to go and return. So the primary meaning of this is to return. And so one sneaky way of sticking this into a translation is to say originally. So feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness also originally like this. But it's a little bit of a forced translation. It's it sounds good. It sounds very Zen. If you put originally into any sentence, it makes it sound more Zen. If you ever want to sound Zen. Originally, yes. Yo, she, like this. Okay. Sarijashije, she, Sarijashije. This is a new way of saying all. We've already had one way of saying, at least one way of saying all. Beop, Dharma. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, right? But this Dharma is a little different, and we'll talk about that. Gong, we've already covered emptiness, so we all know what emptiness is already, okay? Sang. Sang, this is another character that we'll look a little bit more at. What does it actually mean? What do I have down here? Sang. To each other, to see for oneself. Yeah, so doesn't mean that here. What it means here is a characteristic or something that characterizes or that marks something. We'll talk about that more. Bu, Seng. Now, Seng has already been covered because it was a component of a character that was covered earlier. And let me think about it. We'll get to that in a minute. Bu, myeol. Myeol. Which means to destroy or to extinguish. So Seng can be translated as meaning to be born, but you can also say appear. So what? When do we appear in this world? When we are born. Okay. So here we're saying that all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They do not appear. They do not disappear. They are not tainted. And they are not pure. Bulsengbulmyeolburgubu정. And one of the things to take a little bit of notice of is that the bu character is sometimes pronounced with the ul sound, the somewhere between an L and an R in the English language. This it's actually like well, it's difficult to pronounce for me. But sometimes it has that end sound, and sometimes it's just boo. Okay. Now, those were 12 new characters, and there are 15 components that go along with those 12. And then I threw in 3 more characters to round it up to a nice round 30. So I'm trying to cover 30 characters and components in every month, every class. So, in the character, this is su. This is feelings. It has one new component in it, which is over here, jo, nail or claw. This is, let's see, which one is this? This is myeok, I think, which means lid. This is u, which means again. Anyway, this is, oh yeah, so here, this is interesting, that sang is a new character, but all of its components are components that have been covered before. So I just put it in here for completeness, but nothing is highlighted in this row. Okay, shik has one component that's already been covered. This is which one is this? This is not this is un. Yeah, which means words. And this is she. This is a nice component. This means a sword. And so she is made up of one new component, and another new component, gua. So this means This is the in kwansei bosal. Okay, which usually English speakers write this as but it's not it's and it's a different sound in Korean from the English it's a or something like that. This one is easier to pronounce. Gua means this is a halberd or a dagger. This is a very nasty weapon, basically. It is a weapon that is a spear with an axe on it and possibly a hook as well, so that you can drag someone down off of a horse and then, and hack them and spear them. Very nasty weapon, very effective. Okay, and this character is and Gua is made up of an arrow. This is actually a very weird character, Ik. This is a very special type of arrow. It's an arrow that has a string attached to it, so that after you shoot it, you can retrieve it and shoot it again. Okay, that has its own Chinese character. And this is just the slash character that shows up in a lot of this. You can see this is the slash down here that crosses over the bottom part of the gua. Okay, let's see, and this is which one is this? I want to make sure I'm not screwing up. So we're now at shik. Yeok doesn't have any components. Okay, so I'm not taking that one apart. This is bu or pu. So sometimes the initial consonant of b or p is not sometimes it's a very hard b in Korean, and so often it's written as pu. I should have written this as bu because that's the correct romanization of that. So bu is made up again of this. I think that's un, and then this is she. Oh yeah, we already did this. This is all right. That's shik. This is bu. This is chuk, which means to take a step, and this is book, which book means kind of the same thing as as bu. Bu and book mean kind of the same thing, which is common. Well, it happens a lot. And then this is in, this is ill, and this is a new component here, chi, to walk slowly. Anyway, this is just breaking it all down. And actually, I have a better breakdown for all of these. This is just to show you what. Oh, here's dharma. Here's sa. Interesting component. But let's. I like the more pictorial breakdown like this, where you can see how the characters are combined, and then sometimes the components have subcomponents, and sometimes the subcomponents have subcomponents. And so, Su Sang Heng is not covered. Shik. Su Sang Heng is not here because it's a character that was already covered previously, and Shik. So this is the first three new characters. This Jo is one component. Then there's myeok, which means a cover, or it can mean a roof, but usually when it's a roof, it has a little extra dot above it. And this is U, which means, again, it has a blue arrow on it because this is the radical for this character. And on starting with this slide, I'm also showing the numbers that are associated with the characters. Let me see if I can show you an example of how these. Oh yeah, here it is. I'm going to try to do what Joe was trying to do earlier here. I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute. I'm going to hold. Oh, can you? Yeah, that kind of shows up, right? You can see this pretty well. Can you see this? Is it focused? Yeah, even bigger. This is a flashcard that I made. This shows character number 151. You know, if you're making flashcards, or if you're making a vocabulary list, or if you're just trying to keep track of these things, it's good to number them. So this is Su, the character Su, and this is I've been using. I've talked about these flashcards before, but I'm coming more and more to rely on them as the more and more characters that we've covered, just so I can remember the character and the pronunciation that goes with it. I found that the Memrise app is good for kind of getting me started, but it because the Memrise app, because it uses multiple choice, and it becomes a little predictable over time if you use it a lot. You can kind of convince yourself to know things if you take a bunch of these flashcards and shuffle them up and just start pulling characters out. It helps my memory, and it's pretty easy to make these. I'm going to I'll put a file that you can download in the description. You have to cut them out yourself. You're going to ask something, Joe? Looks like you're unmuting yourself.
No, I was just going to ask.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You had mentioned before. Can we actually get those flashcards from you?
Yeah. Oh, actually, you know what? So, for people who are watching this on YouTube, please download the flashcards and make them yourselves. But for anybody who has participated in classes so far, I want to provide them to you as a token of my appreciation for you helping me and encouraging me to do these classes. So yeah, I'll do that. And also, one advantage is I have a nice color printer that I can make these on. And it's kind of so the characters that are main characters in the Heart Sutra have more color in them. The characters that are just components don't. And so you can, if you want to, kind of sort through the cards and just focus on the main characters. Learning the components is helpful, and it's helpful for remembering how to write the characters and remembering how they're put together. You can make up little mnemonics. If you wanted to, you could. Let me go back to back where we were. If you were to look at this character here, this means feeling. So this means claw. This means cover. This means again. I mean, you can make up some story or something about, and usually in Chinese, you can make up like a fake etymology for this. That one doesn't really work very well. This one means this is feelings. whatever feelings are. This is perception. So there's a tree, there's an eye, and there's a mind. Okay, so you can make up some, mnemonic about how a tree and an eye and a mind put together makes up perception, if you want to. So that is useful, I think. And then, of course, the eye is a box with the number 2 inside of it. Okay, so, and then shik, which means consciousness. And, so there's actually many different kinds of consciousness in Buddhism. And this is so, just to make us more confused, sometimes people will refer to the 8 consciousnesses. And it turns out, I'm not sure which character is used for those consciousnesses, if it's the same as the consciousness in the 5 skandhas. But anyway, so shik, which means consciousness, is made up of un and shi. So consciousness is made up of words and a sword, which is, I don't know, kind of interesting. And then words are made up of a lid and a 2 and a box, stacked on top of each other. So if you take this 2 and put it inside the box, you have one character. If you take this 2 and you put it on top of the box and then put a lid on top of it, then you have a different character. And the sword is made up of and a halberd, this nasty weapon. The is made up of rib, which is a character that's already been covered before, which means to stand or establish, and il, which is this. I always call this character the sun, but it's in everyday speech in Chinese, it comes up much more often as the word for day. And then ik here, the strange arrow. It can also be a verb, to shoot. And then the slash, which shows up in a lot of characters, beol, sometimes just called the left falling stroke. Okay, trying to keep track of time. Oh, good. We've got like another couple of minutes before we need to take a break. Now, let's see. Is there more I want to say about any of these characters here? No, I'm going to move on. All right. Try to. Okay, so yeok. All right, now yeah. So sometimes breaking the characters down into their components becomes a little messy. So if you look characters up in a Chinese dictionary, every character must have a radical. Okay, and so if you look this character up in a dictionary, its radical is. Do I even give, because we haven't covered this character yet. I may not have even put it down here. And I can't remember. This is a character that means small. I can't remember its pronunciation because I'm putting it off. I don't want you to focus on this. But if you do look this character, if you do look yeok up in a Chinese dictionary, it'll say it's composed of do on top of this character with an extra slash bookend. And if you look at this character here and try to figure, you can definitely see the do. But then it looks like it has 2 things on the outside and 2 things, and it's the way in which you extract this character as a radical from that is a little funky. And so anytime that there is a component that's involved in one of the characters, but that is not being covered either in this character will be covered later on in the class. This component will be covered later on, but I don't want this character here only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 strokes, and it isn't really necessary to remember the composition, but it is necessary to know. Oh, actually, this isn't even. No, this is the radical. That's right. I'm sorry. Do is the radical. Once you take do off. Once you take the top off of this character, then you have these 4 strokes down here, which are not a character. So once you take the radical away from yeok, you're left with something that isn't a character. So you have to break it down further you know, in theory, until you get things that are characters, or strokes. I'm sorry, that was probably a little too confusing, but uh, nobody ever said that Chinese characters are not confusing. Okay. Okay. Book, which, so the primary meaning, if you just look this up in a dictionary, is to repeat. I'm going to talk more about its meaning later on. Made up of two components: chuk, which is the radical, and bo, or what is this? This is which one is this? Book. Yeah. So oh yeah, this is bu. This is book, right? And it's made up of in and il and chi. So chi is a new one. This means to go or to step. It's not. It, it shows up as a component. It's one of these things. So il, sun. It's good to know what that is. It's good to know that this is a a component form of the character for person in. Yeah, and this is a fairly common component, but it's not that important to know what it means, or how it's pronounced, because you won't encounter it on its own. Um, ya, ya, something like ya, um, which means, oh yeah, no, this is ya, which is made up of a one of the components for ya is also ya, and the other one is gu for mouth. So ya means as or if or like or as if. Ya is already encountered component for female. This component shows up quite a bit too, and of course gu. The component gu, or the character gu, shows up in a lot of other characters. All right, now, um, okay, so character number 157 is J, which is another way of saying all in Chinese. I think we've got at least two ways of saying all now, that we've covered so far in the Heart Sutra, and there's at least one more that's going to come up either in this lesson or in the next, or we might have already. So un is one component, and then ja, uh, that which. Um, Un has a lid. Okay, so yeah, we covered this one already. This is a cool component. This is the component form for a character that's pronounced no in Sino-Korean. In Chinese, it's pronounced more like Lao. It means old, and so this is the Lao in Lao Tzu. Old Lao Tzu. The name Lao Tzu just means old master. Um, and so this is not the character that's used. This is the component form of that character. I don't know if I have it somewhere, the full character form that you would see in Lao Tzu's name. Anyway, and this is of course good old Illigan for the sun. Okay, so oh yeah, and I do have here a picture of the head of a halberd here, so you can see it has yeah, it's just an overall nasty weapon. Um, and so I'm going to stop here. We'll take a 5-minute break, and then come back and pick up on. We'll continue going over all the characters and the components, and then we'll focus on some specific things that I think are interesting and helpful to learn these characters and components, and to learn this section of the Heart Sutra. Okay. All right. I'll wait another few seconds to see if Joe's coming back. But well, we'll continue on. The character beop. Now, you'll see this written. Make sure I'm unmuted. Am I unmuted? Yeah, I'm unmuted. Yeah, you can hear me, right? Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. The character beop. So, in writing out Korean words in using our alphabet, this could be written B-E-O-B, but the final B is pronounced as a hard B, so it's often, if not always, written as beop with the P at the end. It means Dharma, and again, as I mentioned before, we're going to talk a little bit more about what this Dharma actually means, and it's made up of good old Su. Let's see, am I am in slideshow mode. Where's my slideshow though? So I'm gonna let's see, get out of slideshow, card slide. There we go. That's better. Going to good. Because now I can get my laser pointer. All right. So, beop. It's made of good old Su. This is a component that comes up over and over again. This just means water. It's the left radical form of water. It's combined with G. This is a character that means to go. So it's pronounced G. It means to go. That might help you to remember it. It's made up of two characters, To, which means earth, sitting on top of Sa, which means secret or private, kind of an open triangle. The character for Saeng is made up of a tree and I. Now you might remember that tree and I are both components of another character that were, let's see, Susang. Did we just cover it? Let's go back. Yeah, this one here. Tree and I and mind make up Susanghengsikyokuyoshi. But if you have a tree and an I together, it still is pronounced sang, but now it means something different. It means, in this context, this isn't the primary meaning that you'll find when you look it up in a dictionary. It means a characteristic, or in the translation that I'm most familiar with in the Heart Sutra, it's translated as mark, like something that marks something else. All dharmas are marked with emptiness, and that's just made up of a tree and an I just right next to each other. This is probably one of the simplest ways of making a Chinese character out of two other Chinese characters. Just squish them together. So this is a very nice example of that. Now, of course, myeol, the very next one, is going to be more complicated. So this is its radical for this character is just Su over here on the side. And then if you take off the radical, what you're left with is also a character pronounced myeol, which also means extinguish or destroy. I believe that this is very rarely encountered, and that almost always myeol in either written or or spoken Chinese. I don't know if the character really makes any difference because these are both pronounced the same, at least in Sino-Korean. But this is the one that you'll usually see. But this also means myeol, and it is exactly the same character, just with the su left radical taken off. Okay, and then if you break this down further, you get this interesting character sul, which is it's not the character that is usually used for dog, but it is the character that's used to refer to the Chinese zodiac sign of dog. And so, yeah, if you're talking about your dog or someone else's dog or dogs in general, I think there's another character or possibly a two-character word that's used for that. But this also means dog, but it is usually soul is usually used referring specifically, as I say down here, the zodiac, one of the 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac. This is good old Hua. So you can see, so Hua is kind of jammed up inside. See, if you take this character here and take the Hua and kind of jam it up underneath this line, that's how you make myeol. And then when you take apart soul into its components, you it's a bit of a mess. You still have this part here, which is gua, which is the nasty halberd, and then you have a beol and an il that are kind of hooked on there somehow to make the rest of the character. All right. So so far we've had susangenshikyobuyoshi. Let's see what were the characters here. Yokbuyoshi, sarijashije법공상. Yeah, okay. So now we're to, oh yeah. Yeah, so now we're looking at the things that that are not. Okay, so this is dharmas marked with emptiness. They are not created. So so just to kind of keep track of where we are in the Heart Sutra itself, this is dharmas. They're marked, which is saeng, with emptiness. Okay, and they are not created, not, and so that's bull saeng. Bull and saeng have both been covered already. Bull myeol. Okay, so this is destroyed. Well, actually not. They do not appear or disappear is another translation, the one that I actually use most of the time. So this is the disappear in the not appear or disappear. And actually, so in English, we often say they do not appear or disappear, are not tainted or pure. But in the Chinese, it says not appear, not disappear, not tainted, not pure. So that's where we get bull saeng, bull myeol, bu gu, bu jeong. All right, and this is the gu. This is a bull gu, which is tainted. So this is one of the characters where you can, if you want to be a little inventive, try to make up an etymology for the word based upon the meaning of the individual components. This is a component. It's pronounced hu. It means a ruler or a king, and this is a component for to, which means earth. And so, you know, earth is dirt or dirty, and so you can think of it as something. If an emperor gets their clothes dirty, that's one of the ways that I try to remember this. Then their clothes are, you know, tainted. Oops, sorry about that. And also just take note of the fact that this component form of to is kind of distorted. So the bottom line is much shorter and it's slanted up, and then the whole thing is kind of squished in so that it fits next to this. But if you pull it out and straighten things up and pull them out a little bit, then you can see that it's the to character for earth. This hu is another example of a character. So if you look up hu, obviously it has this component down here, which is gu. So what is this up here? This is a character that we're not going to cover in this class. What exactly it is it's a 3 strokes like that, or maybe 2 strokes, but I'm not going to cover it. This character here, in fact, we can look at this right now to see how it's. Let me just break out of this for a minute. I'm looking for. Oh yeah, never mind. Over here. Okay, you can see my screen now, right? Still. All right. So, if you want to see how that character is written, this is bul, saeng, bul, myeol, bu, gu. And it's written like this. There's the toe part, and then here's the hu part. There's 1, 2, 3. Those 3 strokes up there are, so I don't break that down any further in normally, but sometimes you'll see in a Chinese dictionary where they might break it down further into components. But this component, whatever it is not something that we're covering. So just remember this character, hu, which means a ruler, is another word for ruler. There's lots of words for rulers and lords and emperors in Chinese. Okay, so this is the word for jeong, which means pure. It's made up of a component for, once again, su. This is the 3rd time that su has shown up. I'm going to go back into slideshow mode so I can go back. Sorry. All right, so here's su once again, and there's a su as part of myeol. There's a su as part of jeong, su as part of myeol, su as part of beop for dharma, and do we have another su? Let me see. No, that's all the sus. So 3 sus so far, and just in this lesson. So once you take the su off of jeong, then you have jeong, which kind of sounds like jeong. We have this jo shows up again, which means a nail or a claw, and I have a later slide which talks about pieces of characters that stick on top of characters, which I call the hats, and we'll get to that in a minute. This is gay, which is like a snout, or a pig's like a pig's snout. Looks like a backwards E, which is basically what it is. And this is gil again, which means a hook. This character that kind of straight line down and then hooks up. It actually means a hook. Oh, and this is a very nice statue of Xuanzang from somewhere in China that I thought would make a nice picture to go on this slide. Oh yeah, now these are the 3 extra characters that I wanted to add to this class. To round it up to 30, this character here is the character for now. It means gum, it's pronounced gum, and like, so if you've ever known anyone who is Korean, there's a very good chance that their name was Kim. Kim is a mispronunciation of the Korean name. One of the pronunciations of it actually has more than one way of writing it out, even in Korean. But one of the pronunciations is more or less like gum. But the Korean word gum actually means gold. So I like to think of this as the golden present. That's one of the ways that I remember it. Gum is now or present. If you take this character now and combine it with the character for mind, then you get the character for attention, which will be introduced later on in a subsequent lesson. So that's one of the reasons why I'm introducing this now, because I want to the word attention, which is also the Buddhist word. When people talk about mindfulness, what they're in Chinese, mindfulness is now mind. Now mind. If you take the word for now and combine it with mind, you get the word that is translated into English as mindfulness. And it's made up of in, Jew, and this is yet another one of these. Anytime you see one of these characters that I've marked, that I've highlighted in green and put a little asterisk next to, it means that character is, or that component is necessary to show how the character or component is put together, but it's not something to bother with learning on your own. Although this is a little bit interesting. This is what do I call this? I have it down here. I say there's no pronunciation for this. This is written as a single stroke, but you can think of it as two strokes that are where you don't, so when a single stroke, and both Joe and Elizabeth are familiar with this. When you're writing Chinese characters, you make strokes. You write, and then you lift the pen, and then you make another stroke. Then you lift your pen, you make another stroke, and then you're done, right? However many strokes there are. There could be 4 or 5 or 12 or 20 strokes in a character, but each stroke corresponds to a time when you are moving the pen or pencil or brush or whatever it is, and it remains in constant contact with the paper or the wood or the silk or the rock or whatever it is that you're writing on, and then you lift it. And so a single stroke is defined by the time you put down your pen. Let's just say pen, okay? You put down your pen, you move the pen, it makes a mark, and then you lift it, and that's a stroke, okay? But also, usually strokes go in one direction or another. Some strokes change directions in the middle of the stroke, and sometimes people try to think of those as really two strokes, even though technically it's all one stroke because you don't lift your pen while you're making it. So in the character for u, this is a stroke. This is in here. In the character for suk, this means night. This is the second stroke in this. It's also the second stroke in the character for water. The first character for water is in the middle of the character, goes down the center of the character, and then this is the second stroke. It's the third character in the character for forever, which is, I think is pronounced Jung, and it's the fourth stroke. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 in making the character gum. So it's a, yeah. This is a little confusing, at least to me. But at the same time, it's kind of interesting. It shows up in quite a few characters, and it's important to know that sometimes strokes change direction in the middle of the stroke. Okay, so this is a really nice character. This is one of my favorite characters in Chinese. This is the character for to follow, and it is just two people together. So probably this one is following this one, but sometimes it's hard to tell who's following who. It's pronounced jeong, and you can use jeong combined with the character for to, which is the character for earth, to make the character for sit. And so this is in Japanese, this character here, which is pronounced jwa in Sino-Korean. In Japanese, this is pronounced za, and this is the za. This right here, this is the za in zazen, sitting zen. And so this is a good character for Zen students to know. To know how to say sitting zen. We haven't gotten to the character for zen yet, though, which I think is, so the word zen does not appear in the Heart Sutra, but I think I'm going to try to figure out some way of fitting it into one of the lessons as one of these extra characters, which is one of the reasons why I try to include some extra characters in what we're doing, just because there's some things like compassion. The character for compassion is not in the Heart Sutra. I'm going to try to fit that in at some point. Okay. All right. Moving along. So are there questions about this? I've now gone over all of the characters for this class. But of course, I did that in the first 3 minutes of the class too. Remember, I said, okay, that's all the characters we have for this class. And I could go over them all again. One thing, if we have time, I'll go through the animation showing how to write these. But let's keep moving on for a few minutes and see if we can get to how much further I can get. Where's my cursor? Okay, there we go. The next slide. Okay, so one thing I do want to emphasize in this class is that we've gotten to the point where I have forgotten some of the characters we've already covered. I don't know about anybody else, but that's one of the reasons why I brought up and showed the flashcards earlier, because if you just want to jog your memory, something that you kind of know already, and it really is, you haven't forgotten it completely. If you spent even a few minutes working on a character, writing it, remembering how it's pronounced, how it's written, what it looks like, what its components are, and now you're blanking on it, well, it's still in there, and but it does require some review. Review is important. Review is a pain in any subject that you study. Going over things that you've already learned is necessary. Okay, so here's characters that have already been covered. Haeng, susangheng, shik, yeok, shi. Oh, now she is. I'm going to have more to say about she later on in this class. This is an important character. Here it's being translated as this. Sometimes it's translated as is or are. Sometimes it's translated as this, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on. Sarija. Okay, Sarija, that's Shariputra. So Sa, which means, this means a dwelling. Ri means something is sharp. It can be used as an adjective. It could also be used as a noun to refer to profit or benefit. And Ja, which can mean a master. It can also mean a son. And here's she again. Sarija, she. J, that's all. Beop, that's dharmas. Gong, emptiness, another review character. Emptiness, saeng. Sarija, she, J, beop, gong, saeng. Bu is a review character. It's already covered. Saeng. Now, saeng here I've highlighted in blue instead of in yellow because we didn't really cover the character saeng on its own. It was part of this character, which I think this is, let me see, Guan Jia Jie Bo Sal. Sal. So the character Sal, and I mentioned this in the class when we covered this character, Sal is only found in Chinese when you're saying bodhisattva, Bo Sal. It's not a word. It's not a real word in Chinese. And if anybody's watching this video and can show me an example of Sal being used in a sentence in Chinese where it's not part of Bosal, I'd be interested to see that. But from everything that I've heard and read, it's only used as a part of referring to Bosal for Bodhisattva. And so Sal contains saeng as a component. Okay, so that's why saeng is being not being treated as a brand new character, but as a review character, because it was previously covered as a component of the character Sal in lesson 4. Okay, Bull sang Bull Myeol. Myeol is a new character. Bull is another. Okay, so all these are yeah. So that is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 review characters. think I counted that right. Okay. Now, if you get to components that are review, there's even more. I counted up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4. So I think that's 25 review components. And if you go back through all of the Heart Sutra that we've already covered in this class, which is what I'm displaying here, this is everything up to what we're covering in this lesson, which is the title, the mantra, and lines 1 through 6. Almost all of these characters contain components that are showing up again in this lesson. And the only characters that don't contain components that are being covered in this class are ta and che and sek and ji. So ri and sek. This is ek, and this is sek, and this is bu. All right. So keep track. Review. So one thing that I would encourage you to do is when you are, so when you're working on this lesson, I would say spend at least some time writing each of the characters that are in these 3 lines, not just the new ones. The ones that you have been covered before, maybe, don't write them as much or study them as much, but study all the characters. Make sure you're reviewing characters. Don't just say, oh yeah, I covered that, because chances are your memory is fading. I know mine is. Okay, so that's review characters and review components. Okay, now I want to take another look at categories of characters. One of the reasons why I made this list is because I get confused. I see these little things on top of characters. I call them hats, different hats that characters wear. And do is one, especially, so do means a lid, myeok means a cover, myeon means a roof. Okay, and what's the difference? And so they all mean something that's on top of something else, right? Do kind of looks like the lid of a pot, I guess, if you think of this as a handle. Myeok means a cover. For it to be a roof, to be a myeon, I guess this could be smoke coming out of the chimney on the roof. I don't know. You can make up whatever stories you want, but it is good to kind of look at these things. This is a new one, this lesson, Jo, which is claw. There's 2 ways of writing grass as a little hat on top of a character. One is with just 3 strokes like this, although sometimes, and the other is with 3 strokes like this, where there are differences in how these are written sometimes depending upon the font or the person's handwriting. These eyebrows that I call the eyebrows on top of a character sometime, this is a component form of pal, the number 8. Okay, so it's do, jo, myeok, myeon, cho, pal, and cho again, 2 forms of cho for grass. And these will, it's good when you look at a character to, have something to hold on to and say, oh yeah, at least I can tell that it has one of those hats, and maybe you can remember which one it is. Okay. Legs. A lot of times characters will have legs at the bottom of them. This is kind of a funky form of legs, for female, but this often is on the bottom of a character. When you see two legs like this, especially if one of them kind of curls up here, that's in for person. Now you see Paul can also show up as legs, and when Paul shows up at legs at the bottom of the character, they go out like that. When Paul shows up as eyebrows on the top of a character, they go inward. Hua shows up at the bottom of a character as basically 4 dots or 4 little dashes. One is in one direction and the other 3 are in another direction. Gun, which is the character for kerchief, shows up sometimes as 3 legs at the bottom of the character. Now, I put Ju in here because if you remember the character for silk, which is sil, has 3 little legs at the bottom. It almost looks like fire underneath it, but it's 3 little legs, and each of those little legs is considered a separate instance of the And I'll show silk in a little bit when we get to it. It's a character. It's a component that's already been. It's a character slash component that's already been covered. Um, but I just want to make sure that you see where this Jew is coming from. And then also characters that are just single strokes are you should make some effort to remember which is which. So if it's kind of straight up and down and has a little hook at the bottom, then it is the one for hook. If it's more curved, um, then it's the character beol for slash. This character often shows up as um, uh, as a little dash on the top of a character, like yeah, not this dash because it's going in the wrong direction. This dash here on top of do is a Jew. So to make the lid, you put an il, which is the character for one, and put a Jew on top of it, and that's how you make the character for lid do. Oh, and il, of course, is a single stroke character by itself. Jew is another single stroke character. Just anytime you see a little, let's see, do we have any examples of that? No. Yeah. So Jew shows up on top. Also, sometimes, usually it shows up on top of a character. Sometimes it shows up on the bottom. Um, this is a rising stroke, and so in this particular font, it's impossible to tell which direction this stroke is being written in. But sometimes in a person's handwriting, especially if they're using a brush, or sometimes even some computer fonts are designed to exaggerate or to help indicate which direction the stroke goes in. Usually the thicker part is where the stroke starts, and then it tapers off and sometimes ends in a more or less a point. Joe would know better. Joe is probably more of a brush person. Do you ever use a brush, Elizabeth, or do you use a pen and pencil? Yeah, but use a brush, Joe.
I use the brush, and I also, even if I'm using an ink pen, I will uh, try to expand it, if you will,
Yeah,
and make one end a little larger to show
right.
that
Yeah.
line weight.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. And so also, if you ever study any Japanese, in the hiragana and katakana. There are certain hiragana and katakana characters where it drives you totally crazy because you have to know which direction the stroke is going in. And so, as you're learning how to write characters, it is important to know the order that the strokes go in, the direction that they go in. Okay, this is the left falling stroke, sometimes referred to as the left falling stroke. This is the one that I showed that this shows up in a number of characters. It's a stroke that changes direction, halfway through. Uh, now let's see. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second because I want to go back and check something in a previous slide. And okay, so I lost everybody. So, oh yeah, I'm going to go back to the slideshow. Bring this back on top. Oh yeah, I'm going to share my screen again. All right, there we go. Okay. Oh, and so now, oh yeah, okay. So this is, get my laser pointer here. This is the character for gua. This is the halberd. This is basically it's a spear with an axe and a hook attached to it as well. And it is, uh, it, so it's called halberd is actually a German word in the Chinese word for it is gua, which is what we're covering in this lesson. And it's the gua and the halberd are not exactly the same, but it's the same basic principle. If you have an army that is made up of peasants and they're being attacked by knights on horseback, well, you give your peasants guas or halberds, and they're fairly. I mean, I still wouldn't, I wouldn't want to be on either end of the halberd, but this is a radical. It's a radical number 62. It's a component of two different characters in this lesson: shik for consciousness and myeol for destroy or disappear. And it's made by combining another radical, ik, this character for ik that I'm not giving the entire definition here. This is if you look it up in a Chinese dictionary, this is what it'll say: an arrow with a string attached to it for retrieval. Okay, so you shoot the arrow and then you pull it back. Unless you hit something, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how this works. But again, I wouldn't want to be on either end of this either. But and you just combine it with beol, the slash that goes through the bottom part of the ik to make a gua. And then there are a bunch of other characters, many of which are components in this lesson. The character for sul, which again is the Chinese zodiac sign of dog. It's not usually the way dogs are referred to in Chinese, I believe. Shi, which is sword. A lot of these are weapons: arrows, halberds, swords. This is myeol, which I put here. It's very rare. It's more often to see to destroy or to disappear, as we say in at least the translation of the Heart Sutra that I'm used to. This is shik. This is bu shik. This is what Bodhidharma, the last thing that Bodhidharma said to Emperor Wu was bu shik, not knowing. So this is, we're in the Heart Sutra, we're translating this as consciousness, because that's the way it's translated when you know from context that you're talking about the 5 skandhas. And the word for skandha, by the way, or the word for 5 skandhas is o-on in the Heart Sutra. When we say Guan jaje bosal heng shimbanya baramilta shi jo gyon o-on o-on do ilche goek. I think I'm remembering that right. But as you're going through these characters and doing these lessons, and if you look at a character, you should try to remember how that part of the Heart Sutra goes. It will help you. It will reinforce what you're doing, because we're not just learning these things randomly. And this will help you a little bit if you want to go online and try to read Chinese websites, but it won't help you very much unless you're doing a lot of other study along with it. And so I think it's good to reinforce when you're working on the character, to try to remember how that part of the Heart Sutra goes. Okay, shik gam means okay, right. And this character will not come up until the next lesson. But when we say bulseng, bulmyeol, bugu, bujong, okay, that's not appear, not disappear, not tainted, not pure. The next two are do not increase or decrease. And this is gam is the decrease. So the next two are bujung, bulgam. And that will be the first part of the next lesson. But it also contains gua. It's got a halberd in there. Ham, which is not in the Heart Sutra, but it is the 31st hexagram of the Ching, which is kind of cool. And it's a word that means all or completely. Ah is the Chinese word for me or I, and it also contains gua in there. And it's not in the Heart Sutra, but it is in the Kanzeon chant. When we chant Jo Raku Gajo, You know, kanzeon goes namu butsu yo butsu uen bupo soen jo raku ga jo chonen kanzeon bonen kanzeon nen and jushiki nen and fujishin, like that. Ga means I. What is I doing in the kanzeon chant? Well, this is a very weird line in the kanzeon chant. This means eternity, joy, self, and purity. Now, the Buddha taught that everything is impermanent, right? The Buddha taught that everything is suffering. The Buddha taught that there is no self, and the Buddha taught that nothing is pure or impure. But in the Kanzeon chant, we say eternity, joy, self, and purity. And this is actually intentionally the opposite of what you could say is normal Buddhist teaching. This is the well, the actual interpretation of this is something that that Buddhists who like to argue about things like this. But basically, it's if you get rid of ignorance, then in the place of impermanence you have eternity. If in the place of suffering you have joy, in the place of no self you have true self, and in the place of impurity you have purity, or something like that. I don't mean that to be a real explanation, just that it's kind of interesting that we do have in one of our chants I, self, and this means self. This is so sometimes people, because because it seems so out of place, sometimes people will translate this as no self, just because they say, oh well, it says self, but really it means no self. Anyway, okay. So, and then one more place where halberds show up, gua, is sung, which in the four vows, when we say the Buddha way is unsurpassed, we vow to accomplish it. This is sung. Sung is the accomplished. Sung is the very last word in the fourth of the four great vows. Anyway, so I think this might be a good place to take like a 5-minute break and then come back and finish up. Okay. There's lots more. this down. I don't need this anymore. Okay, so this slide is this she. I think this is she for sword. Let me look at this. Make sure I know which character I'm looking at here. All the characters are starting to see, I can. Oh, so one cool thing that you can do with this my handy dandy JavaScript online program is you can copy and paste characters into it, and it'll tell you what character it is. Yeah, it's she for sword, and also tell you how to write it. Okay, and now I don't know if you've I've mentioned this before in the classes. I don't know if either you, Joe, or Elizabeth, or anybody else who's watched this video has used this, but this is just at mindisbuddha.org. If you go, actually, if you don't have to remember the whole URL, all you have to remember is mindisbuddha, and you go to mindisbuddha.org, and then you click on writing the ox, okay, and then it brings up this JavaScript application, and then you at the top there's a bunch of little things here which refer to different different parts of the database that I've entered. Basically, one part of the database is for the Heart Sutra. Okay, click on Heart, and now you're looking at the Heart Sutra. And now, but in addition to, there's also a little button that says here. See if I can make this bigger. Oh yeah, see, there's a little button here that says Han Search. That's for Hanja search. Click on Hanja search, and I'll say enter a Chinese character here, and then you can just paste a character in. All right, which I find very useful. Anyway, this character she, if you look at how it's written in this font that the animation is using, if you compare it, I'm gonna make this as big as I can. You see there's a continuous line here. You see this? You see what I'm referring to, Joe and Elizabeth? That there's this line that goes all the way across the character at the top here. If you look at how it's written in the animation, that's not the case. There's one line in this part of the character and a separate line in this part of the character. And if and when it's actually written, they are it's not one continuous stroke in this animation because of the and that's actually a function of, well, to be kind of, you know, to use some circular logic, it's a function of how you write it. And it's not always written the same. And the fact that it's actually sometimes written differently when people are writing it by hand is also reflected in different fonts that you might run into. So that's why I have this slide here, is to look at differences. And this is not just true for this character, but this particular character provides a kind of a striking example of this, where in some fonts you have this line that goes straight across, and in other fonts you have two separate lines that go with the separate parts of the character. And I've actually labeled it. So the font that I prefer to use is Dengxian. And I like Dengxian for the same reason that other people don't like Dengxian, because it's very blocky. It's not very pretty. It does not look like brushstrokes at all. And I just think it's easier to distinguish, to see what's going on. If you're trying to learn the characters, and you're not particularly artistic like me, then this is a good, very practical um, font. For people who like to see things that look like their brushstrokes, the Batang font is probably a little bit better. The Kaiti, I don't know how this is pronounced, but the Kaiti font is very nice. If you like to see things that look like brushstrokes, this is a good font. This is a pretty font. Uh, I'm not interested in pretty though. I want all the strokes to be, see how the little part inside the ill, I like to see it go all the way across just to, I don't know why. Uh, Now, so Microsoft has a bunch of fonts of their own. MS Minchu and Microsoft Zhenghe are two, and they both show the lines separate. So sometimes the number of strokes it will be different depending upon the font. So since this is a single stroke that goes all the way across, and these are two separate strokes, the way that these are written in different fonts will have a different number of strokes, which can make it a little confusing because the traditional way to find a character is to find its radical and then to know how many total strokes there are in addition to the radical. And so sometimes it's off by one, depending upon how you're writing it. It's just you have to be you have to learn how to put up with stuff like that. I don't know what how else to put it. It's something that you have to be able to put up with. Okay, so now I want to spend a little time just going through. Now the focus of this class really is on learning how to write these characters. So I've shown you the characters and their components and how they're put together. I don't know if I'm going to get have much time. I showed a couple of examples of animations, but at the same time though, I think it's really important to have a feel for what's going on. We're not just memorizing characters, you know, obviously at random. So the characters for this week, the way that they go together to make up what the Heart Sutra means is actually pretty straightforward, except for in a couple of cases, and I'll try to point out where that is. So, susangenshikyokuyoshi, feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness. Also, so this bu sometimes it can be translated as after all. Um, Also, after all, like this. Okay, and I referred to this before. That's referring back to lines 5 and 6. Emptiness not different from form. Form same as emptiness. Emptiness same as form. So emptiness is the same as form, and form is the first skanda, and feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness are also like this. So that's and here this she is being. Oh, I do have a separate slide on she. I actually have two slides on she. This means in this particular case is referring back to something that's already been mentioned, right? That's sometimes this means this right here. That's when it's the called the proximate demonstrative, as opposed to the distal demonstrative, which is that over there. Okay, but this is not this right here. This is referring to something else that's already been said, and that's a different kind of demonstrative. I can't remember the technical term for that, but actually that will be on a slide that's coming up. So this is this this is one of the even when you translate it as this, you have to know what kind of this it is, because sometimes she is translated as is, and both this and is actually are kind of tricky words in English and in Chinese. Okay, all right. So the next line, line 8. Shariputra Sarija시제법공상. Shariputra is all dharmas emptiness marked. So here's is again, all dharmas emptiness marked. And so two words in this line are kind of tricky. In addition to is, which is always, you always have to pause a bit unless you are really familiar with what you're looking at. When you come across she in Chinese, you always have to kind of figure out what's going on. But here is a from the Digital Dictionary of Buddhism, the entry on Dharma. Okay, rendered into English variously according to context: truth, reality, phenomenon, element, constituent, mental factor, things, quality. The word dharma. So this is one set of possible meanings, but here is another. It is used in the sense of ilche, everything, all things, or anything, small or great, visible or invisible, real or unreal, affairs, truth, principle. So, and that's kind of the sense in which dharma is being used here. All dharmas are marked with emptiness. Some people say that here in the Heart Sutra, it's actually referring to mental factors. Mental factors is kind of a Buddhist technical term that where the word dharma is used for mental factors. Some people say that this dharma is being used to refer to everything. Everything is marked with emptiness. And some people will say that everything is a mental factor, therefore both of these are true. Everything is a dharma, everything is a mental factor. It's all mental factors. It's mental factors all the way down. Okay. Now, this character is sang, which in the translation of the Heart Sutra that I'm most used to is translated as marked. Here's the entry for that in the Digital Dictionary of Buddhism, for which Charles Muller should always be. He's one of the primary people who's really behind the online digital dictionary of Buddhism. So sang is a characteristic, an attribute, a mark, a distinctive feature, a perceptual quality. So anyway, marked with emptiness means that it's like, I think of it as like a label on food, right? What does it contain? It is assuming that the label is accurate. Then if everything was labeled with an accurate label, the labels would always say gong, empty. This package is empty, basically. And that's what this is saying. All dharmas, everything are marked with emptiness. Sang, and it's worth. So this word has a lot of different meanings, especially for Buddhists. This word is, I think, it usually in everyday Chinese is usually not used in the way that it's being used in the Heart Sutra, but it does have this meaning. Let's see. Okay, bulseng myeol bulgubu정. Yeah, and that's pretty straightforward. Oh yeah, that's. Wait a minute. Did I skip one? Let's see. That was 7, 8. All right, 9. And then here I also have, for completeness, the next two lines: bujung bulgam shigo gong jung musek musu sang heng. I have a typo here. That should be heng shik. So that completes the kind of the thought in this part of the Heart Sutra. You have to put in not born, not destroyed, not appearing and not disappearing. So we say, or at least I chant, do not appear or disappear, are not tainted or pure, do not increase or decrease. Therefore, in emptiness, no form, no feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness, which is bujung bulgam is not increase or decrease. Shi go gong jung musek musu sang heng shik is and here she is being used. It's really unclear how it's. You can kind of say it is. Go is therefore, and then the rest is pretty straightforward. Emptiness, jeong, actually. So jeong is a nice character in the midst of. So really, this is a little bit more. You could almost say poetic, I guess, in the midst of emptiness. If everything is empty, then we are always in the midst of emptiness. And in the midst of this emptiness, there is no form, no feelings, no perceptions, no impulses, no consciousness, no 5 skandhas. Okay, yeah, so here's one of the slides on she. She occurs 9 times in the Heart Sutra, and it also occurs 3 times as a component of ji or ri, which is actually at different parts of the Heart Sutra. This character is pronounced differently just to keep us on our toes. And sometimes you can translate she as is. Sometimes you can translate it as this. Oh yeah, so this, when it's translated as this, it's an anaphoric demonstrative. So it's this in the sense of referring back to something that's already been mentioned, as opposed to this as this right here, okay, as opposed to that over there. And the reason why you have to, we use the word this. Everybody thinks they know what this means, but actually in English, we use this to mean different things. And the Chinese she is, you have to know which one you're talking about. And actually, some people, or many, in fact, many Chinese language experts think that this was always the only meaning for she up until the Buddhists came along and started translating Buddhist texts from Sanskrit into Chinese. And they started using she, this, to make up for the fact that Chinese at the time, this is a theory. I mean, we don't have a time machine to go back and know for sure, but it's theorized that the Chinese language didn't really have a proper copula, that is a linking verb, that is in the sense of a linking verb in the Chinese language, and so that this anaphoric demonstrative, which always up to that time it just meant this, in the sense of referring back to something that had already been spoken of, came to be used as what's sometimes called a linking verb or a copula, or just, which we usually translate into English as is. And so this shows up several places in the Heart Sutra as is. Some places it shows up as this. I found there's one interesting example in the Homage to the Three Jewels, where it's clearly used in the sense of is, where we say saeng jabu shia bonsa sogamonibo, which is one of the first prostrations in the 7 prostrations part of the Homage to the Three Jewels, which means the loving father of the 4 kinds of beings is our root teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. And this, if you really want to get really crazy about it, I took a picture of a page from my copy of Kroll's A Student's Dictionary of Classical Medieval Chinese, and he gives as the primary definition of she the anaphoric demonstrative pronoun. And then way down at the bottom, he says med, which means medieval. So this is in medieval Chinese, as opposed to classical Chinese, which is before medieval Chinese. In translation of Sanskrit Buddhist text, she was used as a copula to mean is or are, gradually occur. And this is Kroll is reflecting what is generally considered to be the scholarly consensus on this question, that the use of she as a copula, as to mean is, gradually entered the vernacular usage in Chinese during the Tang Dynasty, and probably as a result of the spread of Buddhist scriptures in China. Oh, and that's the last, I think that's the last slide that I have. Yeah, let's see. Now where are we on time? Okay, so we've got let's see, what could I have spent more time on? You got questions about any characters? I would like to just go and look at some characters quickly, and just to kind of but if Joe or Elizabeth, if you have something that you want to bring up, what's on? Yeah, okay, all right, so I'm gonna
Nothing specific. No.
Nothing specific, okay, all right, I'm going to, oh no, this is something that I'm editing. That's a page. I'm trying to oh, what is this? Oh yeah, so I'm working on the which one is this? Is this the evening bell chant? Yeah, we'll get to that eventually. I'll do a class on the evening bell chant. Here it is, evening bell chant, which is nice and short, has a lot of cool stuff in it. All right, so now we're looking at the Heart Sutra inside this JavaScript application, and the lines that we're looking at right now, you can go through on this. You can click on them and see how they're written. Okay, so and here actually this very first character in this line provides some good examples of several of the things that I've talked about. In particular, the directionality of strokes and strokes that change direction. So this first stroke goes down and to the left, which usually most strokes in Chinese, if they are horizontal strokes, are going to the right. And this is an example of a stroke that goes down and to the left. And here's another one right here. This goes down and to the left. So down and to the left. And then another one down and to the left. Here's another example of a stroke that changes direction. So this is it's a little more common to see this kind of a change of direction, a little hook at the end of a stroke, than to see this kind of a change in direction where a stroke goes along and then makes this is about a 120 degree angle right here. It's a pretty sharp angle. And as you're, and this is also a good example of how the a little bit of a counterexample actually. So you see that the where the stroke starts, especially for these strokes that are going down and to the left, they're making a point of making the beginning of the stroke kind of fat and the end of the stroke very thin. This kind of represents the brush being lifted off the paper, right? Ending in a nice point. However, here the stroke is ending fat, starting narrow and ending fat. Because why not? Okay. Now, Sang is I like this character in this lesson because it's taking three components we've already covered. This shows it highlights some of the utility of learning the components because this is a completely new character, but it's made up of components that have already been covered. It's got and the components are drawn the way they should be. This is not always 100% the case, but you draw one component, the muk, then the other muk. These are two muks, the tree and the eye is both muk, and then the shim down below. And the components are all. That's one of the reasons why I spent a little bit of time looking at that other character, the she character, which actually we're going to look at shik next here. Now, oh yeah, that's nice. Now, when you look at so here, this is shik. This is consciousness, and it has two main components. It has the un component, which means words or speech, but then it also has the she component, which is a sword. Now, when in this animation, the way that the database that this animation uses, when she is written by itself, this is two separate lines, which I spent some time talking about earlier in the class. However, when she is combined with un to make shik, this becomes a continuous line. Again, just to keep us on our toes. And so there's a lot of strokes in this character. Which means it's probably a really good one to practice. Get a lot of practice getting your carpal tunnel syndrome on, and see when this stroke goes all the way across when it gets to that point.
Kurt, I'll mention on my book that I made, I'm looking at this, and it looks like my font does not give that very first little stroke, that upward left.
This one?
Right, it's the very first one.
This
to the left.
This one.
That one.
It doesn't have this.
Well, it has it, but it has it just as a flat horizontal line.
Oh yeah. Okay, I've seen that. Yeah, that's interesting.
And it makes it harder to look at, actually, because instead of the three horizontal lines under it, you now have four.
Yes,
like,
right.
How many you're looking at it and your eyes go in and out, like how many are there?
Right. And especially if you know that this little dash up here is really part of the do, which is so it would be interesting to see how the font that you're looking at represents this component if it does.
Yeah, I'd have to.
Yeah, and so
copy that. Yeah.
I don't know. Anybody have a favorite character you want to look at quickly? Because we're going to have to chant the Heart Sutra in about 2 minutes and then end the class. Oh yeah. So another thing that I have in this database, it took me a while to get this in there, but in the field up here, where it says locations, so this tells you that this particular character shows up in the ox herding pictures, 10 ox. It shows up in Wisong's Song of Dharma Nature. It shows up in Xuanzang's Hymn to Maitreya, and it also shows up in the Heart Sutra. One of the reasons why it shows up in all these places is that this is the ya in yore, which is the Sino-Korean way of saying, of all things, Tathagata. So,
yeah.
So when and one of the ways that comes up sometimes is that one of the ways of praying to or chanting to the medicine Buddha in the Sino-Korean tradition is to chant Yaksa Yore Bul, which is medicine master Tathagata Buddha. If you were to translate it all out into English and or Sanskrit. And so this is the ya in yore. So it shows up a lot.
Kurt, I know that character as thus.
Thus, okay, yeah, right. And so Tathagata, there's also tata. Tathagata. I can't remember it now what the Sanskrit is. You don't remember what the Sanskrit? There's thus. There's
it's like tatata.
Yeah, tatata. Yeah. So there's thus, and there's such, and there's thusness, and there's suchness. And of course, Tathagata means the one who comes thus, right? Whatever that means, So yeah, so Yore is a good thing to know. Let's see. Do I have time for one more? It's good to be familiar with how Dharma is written. And then we're going to have to go to the Heart Sutra to end. And I do want to just emphasize how helpful it is to learn the Sino-Korean Heart Sutra by heart when you're learning these characters, because as you look at any character, you look at juk, and it's good to know. Let's see, where does that come in? Yeah. Oh, actually, so and then another thing that I have little tool tips or cheating tips that shows up when you hover over a character. It gives you both the Sino-Korean and the English pronunciation. Gongburi sek sek chuk shi gong. So that's the chuk and chuk. Gongburi sek chuk sek. Gongburi sek sek chuk shi gong. Anyway, all right. So now, to end the class, we will recite the Heart Sutra one more time. Oh, and I do want to just emphasize again, if you've been participating in this class and you want your own copy of the first 180 characters that we're covering in the flashcards, I'll need to get your postal address. So I'll send out an email to everybody who's been participating in these classes. If you haven't been participating in the classes up to this point and you're interested in getting these extremely useful, here's Dharma with all the pertinent information. Let's see if I can put this up here. Oops, nope, I was showing the wrong backside. Anyway, then go to my Patreon page, which will also be linked to in this video, and give me $2. Okay.
Thank you, Kurt.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Elizabeth.
사리자시제법공상 사리자시제법부여시 사리자시제법공상 불생불멸불구부정 부정불감시도공중무색 무수상행식 무한히 비설신이 무색성향 미촉법 무한계 내지 무의식계 무무명령 무무명질 내지 무노사용 무노사질 무고증멸조 무지영 무득 이무소득고 보리살타이 반야바라밀타고 신무가에 무가에고 무유건보 오리전도몽상두경열반 삼세제불이 반야바라밀타고 두간욕타라 삼약삼보리고 지반야 바라밀타 시대신주 시대명주 시무상주 시무등등주능제유 최고진실부라 고설반야 바라밀타 주즉설주와 아제아제 바라 아제 바라 승아제 모지사바 아제 아제 바라 아제 바라 승아제 모지사바 아제 아제 바라 아제 바라 승아제 모지사바 마하반야 바람타 신경
Bye, everybody. Had to unmute to say goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
You.
Take care.
You too.
Thanks.